my gosh, if we could have the. Morning, everybody. Josh Fielkley here. AI Insights and Gen AI News Briefing, rating your top essential or optional news today, giving you time. We hope giving you insight and an occasional smile. All right. This morning we are joined by Tim Hendry, Paul Byer, and Akash. You start talking first article. That would be great.
I'm hearing a lot of background noise, John. Is anyone else hearing that, or is that me?
I'm hearing background noise too, but it's not me. I'm sitting in a pretty contained area. All right, go on now. Akash.
Okay, the first one that we have for today comes from Hermes 3. So it's a new open source model, 405 parameter model.
That would be 405 billion, and yeah, it's built on the back of Llama. Paul, I had you leading us up to this one.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's great to start seeing the creativity and more people building on top of other open source models. It had an odd thing about openly Catholic contributor. It's a very odd thing, but it's optional. It's an interesting thing. Again, it's more experimentation on the edge, but optional for our AI.
What did you think there?
I agree. It's potentially an interesting new model. It's brand new. This is a product announcement. These people clearly want an provocative model, maybe is the way to put it. You know, it's uncensored and open source. So it could be interesting. They claim it has a lot of power and a lot of capability, but it's brand new, so we'll see.
Yeah, I thought too that it was kind of weird that they had a very open prompt, where they didn't put anything in the box and so forth, and prompted it, and it caused some generation of some questions, which if they were done by a human would say were the beginning of an existential crisis, which is kind of weird, but I didn't think very weird. All right, optional it is. Pankaj, next we have NVIDIA chasing weather.
Yes. So the next one comes from NVIDIA. So NVIDIA has launched a new model for weather prediction and climate simulation.
Yeah, Tim, I had you on this one. What's up?
So this is really interesting, but I would say this is another one of those where if you are in the weather industry, prediction industry, or if you're in any industry like airlines or transportation that is significantly affected by the weather, this becomes important. And if you're in weather, probably essential. But that's a fairly small crew at the end of the day. And so for most of us, this is optional, but really interesting. The weather is known to be one of the hardest things to do, especially predictions of weather at any significant fine-grained scale. So we're pretty good these days at predicting whether it's going to rain tomorrow, but not whether it's going to rain at 3 o'clock and whether the temperature at 1,000 feet is going to be that different from the temperature at 10,000 feet. Those things are important for predicting storms and the path of storms that they will take, whether they'll turn into major storms, whether they have convection. All these things are important. So it's fascinating, a nice geeky article, but optional for the AI leader.
Yeah, I had it as optional as well. It's fascinating, down to 3 kilometer scale, and pretty accurate within half an hour or hour before the storm. Another example, I think, of NVIDIA really making long-term investments to build up capability. Tim, I'm going to send along to our mutual friend Andrew Robinson, who's over at Skyward Insurance. They write first insurance and specialty insurance and some reinsurance. Certainly of interest to someone like that, but as you say, a narrow base. Paul, you okay with optional on this one?
Yeah, optional. On the shameless plug side, though, I do want to highlight that Dan Flagan, the chief marketing officer of Tomorrow.io, which is a major player in the space, spoke at our conference last year, done a lot of interesting things, and will be again at our conference this year. So it'll be interesting to see how he views this as a competitive threat. But optional article.
I imagine he won't see it as much of a competitive threat. Last year, Tomorrow was doing such a great job of really looking at the implications of weather down to specific industries. So, oh, you're running freight trains. Here are the implications. Oh, you're running an airline. Here are the implications. So I think this is more higher level. It's not and who knows where they are today. I use the app every day. It's great. Tomorrow.io. It's a fantastic app. All right. Akash, next, please.
Okay, the next one comes from New York Times, and it talks about how a person lost his voice to ALS, and now AI is helping retrieving it.
Yeah, Casey Harrell has got the horrible disease of ALS, which is also sometimes known as Lou Gehrig's disease, where you progressively lose your muscle function. Just a horrific disease, and the set of neural implants, which has a deeper fabric, a more fine-grained fabric and more surface area, they put on the parts of the brain that they think are the most language intensive, and now he can actually speak, and it's got over 98% accuracy, which is amazing. It used to be about 3/4 accuracy in the previous efforts, and you can imagine the difference between having a conversation with somebody with 98, 99% accuracy compared to 3 words out of 4 correct. It's just a completely different experience, and he's overjoyed with his ability to talk to his family again and to talk to his friends. And I actually put this as important, maybe essential, just in terms of the amazing new capability of the human brain, along with the computer brain interface. And this is obviously why one of the big reasons why Elon Musk and others are, and this wasn't a Neuralink project, this was a different company, are investing in this interface. So I don't know, guys, I'm on the fence. Important to essential. It's just as a story, a human story, absolutely essential. Well written, heart wrenching.
Yeah, I actually gave it an essential, which I rarely do, for 2 reasons. The first is, as an AI leader, you have to remember to keep the big picture in mind. And I think we're going to see a lot of backlash over the next 12 months. There's definitely going to be some sort of investor crash because as with all new technology cycles, there's overinvestment. And we see this already with these acqui-hires and things. There's starting to buckle. And so I think just keeping in mind the big picture, this isn't a sham, is really important, and just the humanity of the story to just keep your perspective. The second thing is that this is really powerful because it's a combination of things. It's not just generative AI. Generative AI is a crucial part of it because it enables them to deep fake his voice. So it's not just that it can read his mind, that this neural implant can read his mind. It was a research tool developed by the university. It's not a company's product right now. But that in and of itself is unbelievable, but that's not generative AI. But the generative AI enabled them to take that information and use it to generate speech and then do a deep fake of his voice. And so he can really speak. And so it's a combination of factors. And I've been saying this for a while. It's the combination of using generative AI with other capabilities. It's really going to change the world. And this to me is a change the world kind of thing.
So, Paul, we're heading to the big E on this one. What do you think?
Oh yeah, I'm actually on essential as well. I do think on the pet peeve thing we're talking about before we starting, that should be another pet peeve discussion. I mean, it's not a product announcement. I think not only is it notable for humanity's standpoint, I think it's notable for another major trend on, are we actually going to be entering an era where we're interacting with biological things in a way we've never thought possible? So here is an ALS example with a human. Are we going to be able the same thing, be able to talk to the whales? Will utility companies be able to talk with plants and understand a little more when they're really starting to get more sensitized to pollution and stuff? So, we've talked a lot about Gen AI allowing us to talk to machines, and I think this is a good application of AI and advanced technology allowing us to talk to biological living things. In this case, incredible human story. So essential in my mind.
All right, essential here, and Tim, I would. It's interesting when people talk about overinvestment and so forth. It's funny. All investment in new things is overinvestment, right? If you have
Yep.
because we all are familiar with the venture capital batting average, which is 10%. So so when you have 9 failures, that's not overinvestment. That's just investment. You know what I mean? In that category. So
True, but it does go in cycles because the investment takes a while before the 9 failures happens when you just start out.
well,
So
yeah. Then you have
people are excited, and then when they see the 9 failures, you get the overreaction on the downside.
well again. I hate this whole language. That's the natural state of how the early market works, right? I mean, if you thought of it like you
But I think that,
think of it like biology. I mean, your body sends out billions of sperm and has one child. Is that overinvestment in sperm? I don't think so. You know what I mean? It's like just the way it works.
yeah. But this isn't about economic theory. This is about what it's like to walk the halls in the corporation. And when 9 companies are failing, when Adept is getting acqui-hired, when Inflection
Yes.
lose all its people, it's visible and it makes people nervous. It's like, oh, maybe this stuff isn't going to work, or maybe,
Yeah,
I'm going to ruin my career by doing this stuff. So
I agree. I'm howling against the wind on that one because that's part of the reason that corporations often don't do the new thing because they think about the way they talk about the problem is incorrect, in my opinion. Pet peeve,
yep.
pet peeve number 4,000.
Yeah, no, we're aligned on that one. Yeah.
All right. Next on coach.
The next one that we have comes from Walmart, and it talks about how Walmart is using Gen AI to update its product pages, and it has done so for over 850 million catalog data points.
Yeah, I was going to give this article an optional. It goes through. It basically makes, I think, a distinction which I really don't think is correct, which is they're saying that Amazon's really focused on the vendor with their AI, and Walmart's focused on the end consumer. And it's like, I don't think so. It's not detailed in this article, but I got to believe that Amazon's been using AI for a long time in terms of product choice, in terms of sequencing of shipping. I mean, it's just anyway, I thought it was interesting in terms of some of the how it helps people choose pictures, how it helps people come up with taglines and helping the vendors and so forth. But I think that the title's a bit of a bait and switch, but I would give it an optional.
I agree. Yeah, it's interesting. These are 2 of the biggest companies in the world, and retail certainly they are the biggest companies in the world. And if it's useful to the general leader, it's because hey, here are 2 of the biggest retail companies in the world using this stuff like crazy. So again, it's a good example of this isn't flash in the pan. It's light on details. Yes, they use it in their product catalog. What the hell do they do with it in their product catalog would be nice to know. But the mere fact that they're willing to admit in public they use it is interesting. But I would give it an optional because of the sort of the lack of detail.
All right, Paul. We've gone from the big E, we're going down to the big O. What's up?
Yeah, no, optional as well. I think it's another example of something's come table stakes. I think last year we might have even called this important. Wayfair was another company that had tremendous value of using auto-generated or Gen AI generated descriptions and images to really reduce costs at scale. So optional then for this one.
Yeah, I mean, put your economics hat back on. The ability, and when you think of where organizations can be on the cost complexity curve, how much customization they can do at a very minimal cost, or how much, secondary complexity can they get rid of. I think that, it's just staggering. And this is going to, I mean, we're going to see, I'm glad antitrust is starting to wake up a little bit because we're going to see, organizations at scales we've never seen before because of the ability to munch down that complexity with AI. All right, optional though. Ankaj, next.
Next one comes from eBay, and it talks about how eBay is using Gen AI to make employees and online sellers more productive.
Yeah, and Paul, I was a little late to the assignments here. Would you mind leading us off on this one? Can't hear you.
Can't hear you. You're on mute, Paul.
Tim, I just got cold call. The HBS.
There you go. You know what the Boy Scouts say? Semper paratus. Always be prepared, right?
Yeah. I think it's a good article talking about some of the trends. I think Fortune continues to do an okay job covering this here. I think for AI leader, I found this optional. I mean, if they're paying attention, they know this stuff.
Yeah, what'd you think? Tim?
I thought it was an interesting article. I could go for important because it's interesting to hear the technology leader of a big retailer like eBay talk about his perspective. He's a build versus buy. Interestingly, that caught my attention. So he feels the value of customization, but nothing earth shattering here. So I ended up giving it an optional. Yeah, it's nothing.
Yeah, I mean, he talks about how it's kind of generic in terms of the code it generates. Not long on detail. Yeah, seemed optional as well. All right, optional it is.
The next one that we have comes from Epoch AI, and it talks about how you can allocate compute between inference and training optimally.
Yeah, I gave this to myself. Man, this took me a while. I think, look, here's a super important topic, and in terms of what's the relationship between should I make my investment in making the model more efficient, or should I spend it later by spending more processing time? Paul and I were at a meeting last week where we heard, part of the reason the main reason OpenAI's recent answers may be better than they were, the previous month is, according to this chief technology officer at a different language model, he said that the prompts are being analyzed 16 times, and then they're taking the average of the best answers and giving it to you. So there's OpenAI is spending a lot of money on not tuning the model more. They're doing that too, but they're actually doing a lot of inference based on that model. And so I think it's a very, very important trade-off. As I dug into it, I couldn't make sense of, if you go down Ankash, you go down to there's a table down a little farther that comes from a paper. And I went into the paper, this notion of max span of trade-off in training and what these numbers mean over what time frame. I just couldn't make heads and tail out of it. There's a thing in here about where they have a trade-off function where it goes up to 6 times the cost between inference and pre-training. I couldn't find a time frame. If you're going to do an economic analysis, you have to have a time frame, right? Because you could think of training a model as a capital investment and inference as an operating expense. How much operating expense? A lot of businesses do this. Instead of upgrading the capital to a more productive machine, they do, they'll take a piece of steel or a piece of cloth and do some post-manufacturing work to make it at a particular quality. So it's a well-known concept in manufacturing. I just couldn't make head and tail in terms of how they delved into and got to these numbers. So I gave it an optional, not because it's not a huge area, not because it isn't headed in the right direction, but just because I couldn't make sense of exactly how the numbers work, but it could be user error on my part. So, Tim, Paul?
Yeah, I probably have an even dimmer view of it than you do. I just don't think it's well grounded. I think this reminds me of, if you go even 30 years ago, but certainly 40 years ago, everything about software looked like this: the development of software versus the maintenance of software. So it's not exactly the same, and you probably have to do some work to try and argue yourself into it. but you're basically talking, as you said, you're talking about the capex upfront of investment versus the operating, the tail expense, right? And right now, when things are really frothy and the new models coming out every day, the capex side looks really huge compared to the opex side.
Right.
But if you look at this a decade out and you assume that this is going to be a big industry with lots and lots of customers over time, that model almost always shifts to where the tail completely dominates. That the capex expense up front becomes marginal. Maybe not here again. There are potential variables here like the incredible high fixed overhead of training these models. So maybe that makes this different. But I'm not convinced yet it's all that different. I think it's way too early. And as you said, there's no time frame here. So okay, maybe this is true today. But what if the OpEx side is a 1,000 times, 1,000,000 times more usage than the CapEx side? Does it really hold? And there's no, I couldn't figure out how you would even think about that. So
Yeah, well, I'm a little more. I would like to encourage, the authors, from Epic AI, Villalobos and Atkinson, who I think are two researchers there. And Akash, if you click there, the reference is pretty near the top of the article, and they've got some beautiful graphics and stuff, which again I couldn't make sense of, but they look nice.
better to look good than to feel good.
Yeah, the only reason I'm not roasting these people on a skewer of contempt is I think it's if you step back and you look at the evolution of this industry and you say, okay, how much is going to be in inference? How much is going to be in training? How sticky is that? How much of that is in CUDA, for NVIDIA, and how much of that is going to be more commoditized? And then as a operating executive, we imagine the AI factory going forward. The people who run the CIOs are going to have to, or whoever's going to run it, CIO, COO, whatever sits in the organization, chief AI officer, whatever you call the person who's running the factory, they're going to have to understand this in depth. So I really encourage these folks to keep going, make it more understandable I'm always the idiot that screws up idiot-proof software, but so if they can make it more understandable, I think it's a super important thing. And I like the fact that they're doing the economics around it, but it's really I couldn't.
Yeah, I think it's an important topic. So I'm not. I do think that understanding capex versus opex, inference in this case, training versus inferencing is really important. I just think there are so many potential several order of magnitude changes coming.
Yeah.
It's not clear how helpful this is right now.
Yeah, absolutely. And we don't know, reusability of the assets, what's going to be stranded. So I do the capex, and okay, you can't make assumptions about, okay, it's not like a diaper plant where I can just keep making diapers, until the thing goes away, right? It might be.
Exactly. There's the changes here. This is the classic what Nick Nassim Taleb calls extremistan versus mediocristan, right? This is not a Gaussian distribution with marginal costs. So one simple change in models could mean several orders of magnitude in training reduction costs. It just changes everything. So
Great. And that's why we have a company, because this is so wacky, right? All right. Next one, Coach.
The next one that we have comes from Uncover Alpha, and it talks about the evolution of Gen AI and from breakthroughs to bottom lines.
Yeah, Tim, what do you think of this one?
It's a good article from my perspective. So I almost gave it an important, but it's really about investment. And there is a perspective that says, hey, this isn't a bad way to look at the world because you need to make certain bets, if you will. Even like if you're buying infrastructure, where are you going to buy it from, and what's the relationship between the big guys and the little guys? So it's kind of interesting at that level. It's really focused on
Tim,
investment.
can I pause you for a second? Akash, if you could just scroll down, there's a nice graphic about relative capex by Microsoft, Google, and so forth. Yeah, that's just keep going down a little farther. There we go. You make it any bigger, that'd be great. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah. So there's some good insights in my opinion here. I've been thinking for a while that Oracle was the sneaky backdoor entrant, and he's pointing that out, because the same thing that got his attention got my attention, which is, why the hell is Microsoft outsourcing infrastructure for Azure to Oracle? There's only one reason they would do that, and that's because they ain't got enough. And and the point he made about Oracle owning a lot of the databases in the universe, and so having a potential advantage there that people aren't paying attention to for helping large-scale organizations and even medium-scale organizations get their data into a Gen AI model. Interesting, very interesting. So a nice perspective on the overall industry structure. But I am an AI leader, and I'm like, yeah, okay, but this might help me invest. It gives me a little perspective. I could argue for important, as we say. That means read it if you have time. But from that perspective, from the perspective of industry dynamics, if you want to be an investor, it's a good article to look at if you like this kind of investment process.
Yeah, I'm with you on chin the bar on important. As you say, interesting role that Oracle could play here. Going to be fascinating to see how people do when they do or don't have their own chip, right? Obviously, Google has their own, and so forth. Amazon doesn't, but they're starting to build it. What do you think here, Paul? We got a 2-1 on important.
Yeah, I think it's important. I mean, I do think it's important for the AI leader to understand their incumbent vendors' roadmaps and kind of where they're going and how this big power play is particularly very big, complex organizations here. So I think from that standpoint, it is a new piece to the conversation of expenditures, and so important. Also important.
All right, Akash, what's the big tote board here? If you'd work on that. And meanwhile, any announcements, Paul or Tim?
We had a good discussion last night at the Learning Lab, kind of ad hoc one, but about how to roll out change management or behavior change modification, or getting employees to adopt and drive value out of Gen AI productivity tools. So take a look on that. It was a good, robust discussion. Very, very big topic. No easy answers. But a lot of contributions from the audience.
Yeah, I will say, I don't know if I've said this before, but for those interested, if you haven't tried the voice interfaces to these systems, like OpenAI's voice interface, try it. You will have to pay the $20 a month. You can try for a month if you want to be cheap. Just pay $20 and try it, because
and I think, Tim,
game-changing in how robust it is, and how it expands your ability to use these tools in almost any environment for any purpose.
Right. And Tim, I think another advertisement for that. It's a peek into the future. It's like when John and I were at in San Francisco, and we took the Waymo autonomous driving car. You kind of see it for the first time, and that voice thing is so different than the text thing. It really is viscerally powerful.
Yeah, it's another, again, all these tools are mediators to complex landscapes. And, voice is a very powerful mediator. Text is powerful too, image is powerful too, but voice is incredibly powerful for a lot of people. So,
yeah, there's a fantastic Harvard Business Review article done by Peter Drucker many years ago that talked about different learning styles of senior executives. And the example he gave was Ike Eisenhower, because when Eisenhower ran the Supreme Allied Command, he was often seen as unbelievably capable with the press. And just think about managing. It's what a nightmare. I mean, managing de Gaulle and Churchill. I mean, can you imagine? I mean, my God. And so he got that done, right? And he was known as just flawless with the press. And then after he followed Harry Truman in the White House and won the presidency, he was often seen as kind of a bumbling, person with the press, very incompetent. And so Drucker said, why was that? And he put something together I thought was very interesting. He said, some executives learn by reading, some learn by talking, and some learn by listening as a primary learning mode. And of course, everybody does some of each, right? And he said, fundamentally, Ike was a reader, but he inherited a White House full of folks from Truman who were Truman learned by listening. So his folks talked to him. And he posited that was the problem, that Ike was getting prepared in the wrong way. And he also, the relationship with the press, in the military press, he would send out a briefing and then I'd have comments on it. So again, it was reading, and he would communicate by writing. And I think that's profound. And what these talking, listening model is opening up is those other kinds of learners, right? People who learn by talking and people who learn by listening.
Yeah.
And I find myself, I would say, I'm kind of a smattering of all of them. Sometimes I like to read, sometimes I like to listen. Unfortunately, for some people, I learn by talking. Anyway, so I just think it's going to open up all kinds of new learners as we get through this. The other thing I've been experimenting with in this thing is analogies. Like, I don't really understand quantum computing. I'm trying to understand it, and so I've been asking it for different analogies. And it's fantastic. It gave me 3 analogies yesterday. I feel like I'm less stupid than I was the day before because, it's an area I don't understand why error doesn't propagate as fast as the qubits, and that therefore screws up, truth maintenance. But it was helpful. I was having a conversation with it yesterday.
Yeah, John, I would double click on the analogies. So explain this to me, give me an analogy, and then I also like saying, it feels to me like this. Tell me why that analogy is wrong. And it's breathtaking. It's patient. It's clear. It's stunning.
Yeah. All right. Well, thank you, Akash. Thanks, everybody. Hope you found this useful this morning. We got 1 E, 1 I, and a bunch of O's, and certainly a heart-wrenching and both a combination of scary in the sense of the ALS part, but also the fantastic job that folks have done in terms of helping that patient rejoin the world through voice.
Absolutely. It's not a long extension to say, if you can do that with voice, why can't you do that with limbs? And if you can do it with limbs, why can't you? Sight is much harder, but still, the basic idea is the same. Mm-hmm.
Right.
Yeah.
Amazing. All right. So long, everybody. We'll see you tomorrow morning. Goodbye from GAI Insights and GAI Insights team. Bye-bye.